progress.
Good evening. I would like to call to the order the ACSD board meeting for November the 10th. The current time is now 6:30. At this time, I would like to do introductions, starting with Jason this time.
Jason Jones.
Laura Hartman.
Steve Cash.
Mary Heather Noble.
Trisha Allen.
Ron Ratcliffe.
Jess Venable Novak.
Steve Orzek.
Ellen Whelan Weist.
Wendy Baker. Barbara Wilson.
Suzanne Buck.
And administrators in the audience and principals.
Courtney Cron, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Pat Cranky, Director of Finance and Operations.
Bruce McIntyre, Director of Facilities.
Caitlin Steele, High School Principal.
Gila Wizzle, Middle School Principal.
Thomas Purcell, Shoreham Principal.
Okay, excellent. At this time, could I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda as warned.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda has been adopted. At this time is our first public comment period. And just the guidelines for our public comments. Public comments are encouraged and welcome at each regular board meeting during the time designated for comment. The comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Citizens wishing to make a comment will be called upon by myself. As a reminder, the public comment should not design to be discussion, but rather an opportunity, public comments are not designed to be a discussion, but rather an opportunity for board members to listen to constituents. Public comments regarding personnel, student, or legal matters will not be heard by the board during this forum. So with that said, if there's anyone in the room that would like to make a public comment, and we'll also alternate between those on Zoom with those in the room. Please, if you're online, please raise your Zoom hand. Okay, so Mary Gill, we can start.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Mary Gill, and I am a former member of the ACSD school board. And I just want to just say I appreciate all that you're doing. I know how hard the work is that you're involved in, particularly now that the challenges are so daunting for you all. But since I've left the board, I have remained committed to supporting your work. I am currently a member of the AAUW, which stands for American Association of University Women, which was established in 1881, and the Middlebury branch has been active since 1920. Historically, our mission is to advance equity for women and girls and expanding their higher education. Locally, we have expanded our mission to advocate for inclusive policies and opportunities for all students, not just women. I wanted to make an announcement that this month we are hosting a community forum regarding Act 73, the Vermont Legislature's task force on the various proposals to restructure the public education system. We are grateful to have Dr. Baker, along with ACSD former board chair and state representative Peter Conlon, presenting some of the current configurations in play. So the forum will be held next Tuesday, November 18th at 7 o'clock at Middlebury College Bicentennial Hall, room 20. And this meeting is open to all, and I encourage everyone who is interested to attend. It will also be available on Zoom, which is in the, I'll make sure that that is posted. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, do we have anyone in the room that would like to make a public comment? If so, raise your hand.
Can I ask a clarifying question? My understanding is there's public comment at the end too, correct?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Is there anyone online that would like to make a public comment now? Seeing none, don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, so we'll move to the next agenda item, and yes, there is a public comment period at the end as well. Next up is recommendation to approve the minutes of October 27th. May I have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Steve?
Looking at the negotiations committee, it says Steve Ordick reported that the committee is at work on a revised proposal. The first proposal was rejected by the association. I'm not sure where that came from, but that's probably what was an election of artifact. That's not where we are in negotiations, let alone what happened. So,
Can you clarify what it should have said?
I seem to remember that that's the one where we said we hadn't met. Again, we had another meeting scheduled for a strategy session on November 4th, and our first meeting with the association was on November 18th.
Thank you. Any other comments, corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes with the change that was noted, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yeah, I see Ellie. Any abstentions?
I abstain, I just wasn't present.
Yeah, actually, I abstained too. I said I automatically, but I
Okay, thank you.
So Jess and Eleanor abstain.
Thank you.
Next up is approval of the ACSD bills. I'll turn it over to Jason.
Great. Suzanne and I reviewed the bills. There were 3 warrants today. A payroll warrant dated October 31st for $1,451,643.07. The Egyptian Fund warrant dated November 7th for $7,104.24. And a general fund warrant dated November 7th for $555,441.70. We had several questions that were immediately answered and no concerns. So I move that we approve the bills as read.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the bills, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, next up is report of the superintendent. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Baker.
Okay, so we have personnel appointments and resignations up first. I would draw your attention to the appointment of Emily Fico as a social worker. She is joining the one of the alternative pathways in the high school, replacing Emery Clark. So we've been able to fill that position. Otherwise they are prepared for your approval.
Can I have a motion?
I move to appoint Hannah Brown, paraprofessional 1.0, Jennifer Charbonneau, paraprofessional 1.0, appoint Emily Fico, social worker 1.0, appoint Gina Giotti, paraprofessional 1.0, appoint Jess Knowles, paraprofessional 1.0, appoint Savannah Mitchell, paraprofessional 1.0, Kathy Parizo, school nutrition assistant 1.0, and then accept the resignation of Sarah Carpenter, paraprofessional 1.0, and the resignation of Ethan Miller, also paraprofessional, who's a 1.0.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions, comments, discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the slate of personnel appointments and resignations, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
No.
Okay, thank you, Steve and Laura.
So the next part of the superintendent's report really is an update as to where we are with conversations that we've been having now for just about 9 months relative to Bridport and Shoreham classroom configurations and how to proceed. There's a slide deck that goes with these, and I'm truly in hope that by some miracle it arrives on the screen. While Jason is doing that, I just want to say that that the work I'm just going to share by way of Messenger is really the work of many people over this time period. Many of the Bridport and Shoreham staff are online. Some are in the room. Emily Blistein is here somewhere. Matt, Bruce, Courtney, LaShawn, and Jenny, and as well as members of community members and parents that have shown up and contributed ideas and thoughts along the way. So, as while Jason keeps typing, I'll keep talking. When we first talked a little bit about how this work was evolving last spring, there were really what felt like an astonishing number of people who were weighing in on the conversations about how best to support students in both of these schools to make substantial progress efficiently and effectively. And that engagement has continued. There have been community meetings that have been extremely well attended in both communities. We've had multiple staff meetings when staff have reshuffled their schedules to be able to attend. There have been many surveys, the last of which that just concluded 142 participants. We've had upwards of high 70s, low 80s in terms of percentages of families in both Bridport and Shoreham that have participated in not one but 2 iterations of conversation. And so I feel very fortunate to have been able to get to know something about the communities of Shoreham and Bridport as a new superintendent through this process, as well as just understand where the values are and how we could begin to come together around options for moving forward with kids. So as they continue to find the slides, I also want to say that I've invited the building principals to join us tonight, so you will see them in places where they could work and listen, maybe at the same time. And that is in part because there's a part of this presentation that relates to what we mean when we say strong classrooms, right? What we mean when we're talking about the academic experience that per the strategic plan that you have, we are working to ensure that students have access to across the district, not just in Shoreham and Bridport, but everywhere. And that is, as you can imagine, work that is led by our building teachers and our teachers and staff, curriculum teams, instructional specialists. It's hard work. I think it's work that motivates people forward. It feels like work that is appreciated. We were provided with many accolades by the NEAS committee and the IB team that was here to just to review that work with us. And so what we're talking about here is really work that you can see reflected across the district in many respects. And so this is not a conversation that is not going on in all of our buildings in some way, So one of the reasons that, again, continuing to talk while this works out, that we are talking about Bridport and Shoreham and what to do specifically with those classrooms relates, if you think all the way back to a year ago, we really had just for maybe the first time ever, some say, or certainly in a long time, had taken a look at any performance data publicly that was disaggregated by school as opposed to as a district as a whole. And The reason for that was that Vermont has a state board regulation that says that you cannot report data publicly when the N, or number of students in a data set, is below 11. And so with many of our smaller schools, the N is less than 11 per grade. And so in lots of places across the state, it's not able to be shared publicly, either with groups of parents or board meetings or in any other way, if that's the case. And so when we began to do the equity-based budgeting, and we were looking at, okay, well, how are the students doing? What do we know about that? That's an important part of working through an equity-based budget, so that you understand where resources might need to go. We began looking at VTCAP data, in part because it is represented in the strategic plan as the indicator that we need to attend to, and in part because it is the sort of publicly released data we have that demonstrates equity of program implementation. State assessment data, as we've discussed, is not data that tells us about whether a single child has achieved necessarily. If you haven't had geometry as a high school student, then you aren't going to do well on the high school assessment, for example, and students don't have control over that. It tells us more how our programs are stacking up relative to the state expectations. So when we began looking at that, one of the things that we noticed is that the data that related to Bridport and Shoreham from the first and second year of the implementation of the VTCAP was different than those in other schools in the district at that time. And so we began an inquiry to look into why that might have been, what differentiates the schools perhaps from the other schools in those experiences. There are wide demographics in all of our schools. There are students who are particularly interested in academic matters, not so interested in academic matters. Students who are socioeconomically well off, students who are with families who are struggling socioeconomically in all of our schools. And so what was it about what was happening in these two schools that we needed to understand, and what would be the best course of action in terms of moving forward? So our inquiry was to find that out. We went through a multi-stage process to do that, and then we have some results and next steps for you. So before we go into the presentation, are you the slide manager, Jason? Who is? Okay, all right, thanks, Matt. Before we go into the presentation, I want to say that it is really important that I'm saying out loud, and we'll take the opportunity to remind as needed that every single one of our kids in ACSD has the absolute intention and capability to thrive. And so our job is to determine how we bring that opportunity to all of our students, relative to where they are. That's our job in what to do. So our inquiry really, is around strong classrooms, which equals student opportunity. So how are we defining what happens in a strong classroom for kids? What supports can we provide to overcome inequities in student success, which is what we were beginning to understand from our initial look at the VTCAP data. And then what do we need to do? What are the important next steps in order to make substantial progress efficiently? Go ahead, Matt. So concurrently with this 9-month process, we also went through NEASC evaluation and an IB review. And during that process, we defined more clearly and succinctly a shared understanding of what high quality learning looks like. And that is a document that is now utilized in all of our schools. All of our schools, including Shoreham and Bridport, had the opportunity to contribute to that document and refine that document. And it's now a guiding force for where we're going within all of our classrooms. that guiding document speaks to depths of knowledge, and I bring this up because the depths of knowledge that that Webb offers here are part of what underscores how a large-scale assessment is developed, as well as everything down from common assessments to classroom assessments, and how complex they might be, to simplify that. So for example, a task that is at a depth of knowledge level 1 might be a straight skill, right? Add, subtract, define, identify, things like that. So those of you who might think about Bloom's taxonomy can kind of apply this as we go along through. Depths of knowledge, levels 2 and level 3 are what is most commonly found on a state test. We have assessments that are reflected in our shared understanding of high quality learning that run across all 4 depths of knowledge levels. And so a strong classroom, in our definition, has all 4 of those. And it has those both in scaffolded ways and in independent ways. With grade level content material. So you might remember when we were implementing the class size policy that we started to shift our discussion a little bit from multi-age to multi-grade classrooms to ensure that when we had 2 ages of students coming together, those classrooms were working with grade level material that was appropriate to both of those ages. And I think maybe over time that was a concept that just hadn't been held to as quite as tightly. And so one of the things that we came to understand in this process is that Bridport and Shoreham, the thing that they have in common, which we I think collectively as educators feel is at the heart of the challenge that they have faced, is the toggling of grade configurations that have led to curriculum gaps and challenges that have made it so that students' access to the aspects of our strong classroom, which I think would lead us to be very proficient on our state assessments, just haven't necessarily been available in all the content areas for all the kids as those grade configurations have toggled. And so part of what we're working our way through is how we manage that. There's one more thing that I want to say about sort of how we make sure that strong classrooms are successful. And actually, this is something that Courtney's going to speak to, and it relates to the things that happen outside of the classroom. Because in order to put classrooms together that meet those standards, this is not a low bar. We need to have supports built around those. And so these 7 are supports that you might see showing up in various lists of these kinds of things. And Courtney's just going to refresh your mind about what they look like here and things that she's spoken to you about that work with each one as we go.
I think all 7 of these items might not be a completely comprehensive list, but we did have a limit of how many things we were going to put on this slide. I think they're all also in varying degrees of implementation. A coordinated curriculum, number 1, is something this district has been working at for a long time. Our elementary program of inquiry is part of our coordinated curriculum. But so are our agreed upon assessments and programs in math and early literacy and decodable texts. So we have a wide range of inputs, you might call them, that we articulate as our coordinated curriculum. And we're returning to this idea together of when those are in place, what does high quality learning look like in the classroom, and what's our shared vision for that. So despite having a coordinated curriculum, that could possibly look really different in different places, which is why we've come together around this idea of what does it look like, feel like, sound like on the ground in classrooms when instruction and learning is high quality. classroom assessments linked to state standards and developed in alignment with our shared understanding. At the secondary level right now, our educators are working on common assessment audits. They're looking at all of the assessments. They've said, these are what we hold common for our students. Every student in 9th grade geology will take this assessment. They're auditing it for alignment with our state standards, for our local assessment proficiencies, and then comparing it to our shared understanding of high quality learning to think about what aspects of this shared understanding are present in this opportunity for students. We're not currently conducting that same audit at the elementary level yet, but we are thinking about where do the standards show up in our curriculum, where are we collecting evidence of learning from our students, and where are those pieces of evidence common across all of our elementary schools. We've had what we've called grade level teams, I'm on number 3 now, across our district for some time, and this year we're formally calling them at the elementary level PLCs, or professional learning communities. A major shift of that work is a move towards, instead of looking at inputs or things we create for students, which is also important and tied to number 1, we really want to ask the question, how do we know what we're doing is working? And so looking at evidence of student learning. If this is our coordinated curriculum, if these are our assessments, when our PLCs come together, they're looking at that evidence of student learning to make decisions about next steps based on what they're seeing. That links right into number 4, analyzing data, looking at student work to make intentional instructional moves. Interventionists, we've had interventionists, we've continued to invest in interventionists. We think of intervention as something that can happen in the classroom, and it can also happen in different tiers of our MTSS. Number 6, we've added this year instructional specialists in math in many of our elementary schools and in literacy in a couple of our schools. And that's been a major focus of our work this year. It's been a really exciting opportunity to see these, especially math specialists, because that's where we've been having a lot of our discussions this fall, come in and work right aside our teachers in thinking about what our students need, being another set of eyes, collaborating, co-planning, co-teaching in our classrooms. And then last year, for the first time, we had a very expanded summer offering. We ran 2 sessions. The first one was right when school was released, and the second one was right before school started, with a wide range of learning opportunities on Vermont's educational quality standards, additive and multiplicative reasoning for elementary classrooms, multilingual learning in the classroom, something we call a curriculum camp, where our teachers come together and refine their units and make collaborative decisions together. Probably a couple other offerings I'm forgetting. Jonathan Miller Lane at Middlebury College tagged on to one of these opportunities with a course he's teaching right now to some of our administrators and teachers. It's running through the school year. So, like I said, there's probably 14 things that might fit on this slide, but these 7 represent a bulk of our focus right now.
And the point of beginning this way again is to make sure that we're calling to light, if we are looking for a deep learning opportunity for our kids in our classrooms, the VTCAP is not a bad measure of that in the areas that it measures, because you have to work at complexity. You have to bundle skills together in order to be able to demonstrate proficiency in ELA and math. The ELA is writing, speaking, listening, and reading, and the mathematics has a number of parts as well. So in order for that to happen well, that is, it's a high bar. We are working as we come awake, as a district, right back kind of out of the pandemic, out of the transitional years, and into a place where we are now able to put more of our dedicated efforts as a system in this way. And all of these supports are supports that are important in terms of making that happen. And so this is work that our system is doing together. There may have been a day when in Addison Central, each school was sort of left to their own, right? Which was kind of the supervisory union model to do whatever they chose to do in hopes that would sort of, yield good results. And we're certainly not there in this context. And so I just wanted to make sure that we kind of begin with the end in mind in terms of the classrooms that we are trying to support as we're thinking about where we are in supporting students across the district, but in this inquiry relative to Bridport and Shoreham. So if we keep going, this chart and the next chart are the charts that Courtney showed at the October 13th board meeting that led us to, have a question about whether or not inequitable opportunity existed, that needed our attention. And so, if you also flip to the math slide, Matt. So the long red bars that that are part of Bridport and Shoreham, over the 3 years, are part of the bigger concern. The yellow bar, remember from Courtney's presentation, and of course hers will be much better than mine, is the almost. That's the you're not quite there area. The red bars are the below standard, and so that is a different instructional lift than curricular adjustments, perhaps additional differentiation, more targeted assessments. That would indicate that we have in these cases some significant number of students who are missing curricular pieces. From a school improvement lens, where I spent about 10 years of my career in various parts of the country, with schools, analyzing their data and kind of figuring out, ways to attend to that. So that's what led us here. Go ahead, Matt. So the next question that we asked through this inquiry, as was recommended in some of the meetings, is, has this challenge persisted over time? And so this chart shows you the students who are proficient only. And the last 3 bars in both the left and the right represent the VT cap assessment that you've seen in ELA and math. And the others represent the SBAC assessment, which is the state assessment that was before the VT cap. There's not a lot of difference in how students are performing now versus how they were performing then. You can see that, I think Bridport's on the left and Shoreham is on the right, or green and blue. You can see that one of the things that's interesting is that Shoreham's earliest testing year, which I think is 2018, is they were a much bigger school at that time. I think they might have had 100 kids or so, so, that's, I don't know exactly, when sort of the enrollments changed as dramatically, but that's just an interesting point. Bridport has had, multi-grades for some time and, has not changed in population as dramatically as Shoreham has, from that period. So when we looked at this, we thought, okay, 2 things are important. Number one, at one time, performance on the state tests, and the state tests, since their inception, I've gotten to know 4 of them now over my career. They've not changed tremendously. It's the same set of standards. So what they measure has not changed tremendously. So you can see that we have had success, in this area, and you can also see that there are places where there's been persistent pockets where success awaits us still. And I just I thought that would be probably of interest, and it was part of our inquiry about what's happened over time. All right, if we keep going, the next slide is really what else do we know that relates to screeners? And I will say that the most important evidence about how students are doing in a classroom are classroom assessments. It's classroom work. They say the measure of a good school is the daily work of its students. So we have it's hard to capture that over time, and so this is the fall FastBridge screener data in ELA and math. And this is all of our schools. And so what you can see here, and these are the students that are proficient, what you can see here is that there's a little bit of discrepancy, but it's not as much. What's important to know about this assessment is that it's a very different assessment than the VTCAP. This assessment is measuring discrete skills, and they're probably largely level 1 skills. We're in the process of talking with the contractors that create this assessment and others, and so we're in the midst of that inquiry. But these are skills, for example, like phonemic awareness, automaticity in reading, calculating, facts, and the degree to which those are automatic. So the purpose of this screener is not to determine whether kids are proficient on a high bar of academic expectations. It is to determine if we have students at risk in specific skill areas. So you could say that if you don't have very many students that are at risk, you have a better chance of them meeting that high bar, but it is not, there's no causal relationship there at all. In fact, one of the places where in my career I've seen schools go wrong in school improvement efforts is to spend too much time thinking about results in these assessments, because it can push you actually to narrow the curriculum into level 1 tasks, rather than ensure that all kids are having access to the tasks that require more higher order thinking, constructed response, conceptual transfer, things of that nature. So they're not different. However, these are we were happy to see that. I wouldn't say that overall there's a big difference, in where these screeners would land at this point. So, I said this conversation began 9 months ago, and it did with the meeting that I and the principals had in each of the building with the teams of teachers and the staff that were able to join there. And the purpose of that first initial meeting was to say, okay, what do you need? Where are we? And what do you need? And what does that look like? And that really began, a discussion and an inquiry that where teachers at that time first voiced a preference for a single grade classroom environment, in order particularly to attend to the number of students that needed to go from the below average, the red, up into proficiency, which is a significant instructional challenge, especially if you are talking about one that's been compounded over years. So taking a 4th grader, from red, right, to blue is a different task than taking, a 1st grader in the same, if there were an assessment in that respect. So that was the first time that they began to really express that. We had meetings with parents that were some of the most moving meetings I've ever been a part of in my career. And I have never before that time sat in meetings with parents and the corresponding teaching teams where we looked at data that showed the large numbers of students that were not proficient together. And the approach that the parents in those meetings took was it was moving. They immediately began to ask the teachers how they could be supportive, what was needed, what would they need in order to be able to move ahead. And I've just never seen that kind of immediate collaboration. Sometimes when we're in those conversations, everybody is looking for someone to blame for something somewhere, and I didn't hear a word of that anywhere, and I was just, it's one of the things that makes me so pleased to be here and be of service here. Nevertheless, this was something that it was clear that we needed to face together, and at that time, the teachers in each of the schools shared some of the things that they were struggling with, like, students who were coming to them from a lower grade, not having gotten through a lot of the math curriculum because where they started in that grade was far enough behind that wasn't necessarily possible to do. So it felt like this conveyor belt that we just couldn't quite catch up on and get off on in that respect. We decided as a result of those meetings that the only way that we would be able to put forth an option that would allow for a more doable teaching assignment for our teachers would be if we were to put forth a model of single grade instruction that had grades K1, 2 in one school and 3, 4, 5 in another school, so that the learning populations in both schools would be combined and the grades would be split in that way. So we discussed that, and we decided that we would put that out as an option for parents to be able to weigh in on, and staff to be able to weigh in on, to determine if that was an intervention which would have started this year had we gone that route, that was warranted at that time, felt doable to implement well, and would make a difference in enabling the teaching teams to be able to position their work such that we would have the best chance of having the most students make the most progress as soon as possible. You probably remember that I generated a report about that after the final survey results were in, I think, May 8th, and submitted that. I think John did an article on that. And at that time, we looked into the archives, and 27% of the Bridport K-5 families thought that was either the thing to do or could be the thing to do with an adjustment or two. And 29% of Shoreham families felt that way at that time. And that was not enough of a support base to make it sufficient to me to recommend to you as an action that we take at that time. What came out of that was a desire to look at a K-5 combined learning single grade structure for the 26-27 school year, with potentially preschool being located in the other building. And so we began doing that. We called together, Emily did a masterful job, inviting parents from both communities to join working conversations about different aspects of that plan. And the community presentation is in your appendix here. And many of you attended that community meeting. And so I won't go over all of those details, but you can see on this slide in the red dot that they came together in June, began working through facilities, transportation, programming, and staffing, and the possibility of preschool relocation, whether the licensing folks would think favorably upon Shoreham Elementary School as a possible preschool location, as the facilities identified Bridport Central School as the better location for K-5 grades, given that it's 18% bigger. It is more easily reconfigured, and all classrooms have access to outdoor areas. And the playground has more space, so that there's a better opportunity for kids to be able to play there. So that meant that Shoreham Elementary School was the place where potentially a preschool could be located and could be expanded if that was the board's choice. We looked into transportation and found no barrier there either. Essentially the routes can stay the same with approximately 10 more minutes of time on them. If everyone wanted to be on the transportation group that determined the better model, which might have bus routes that are actually crossing town boundaries, which is not so much how they're set up now. But the conclusion of the team is that there are no significant transportation barriers, including adding, something that we learned was very important as we are supporting Ripton families who are joining Salisbury Community School, which is a late bus, if you will, to be able to ensure that students, are able to get to their corresponding town, later on in the day for some after-school programming. Since, one of the things that's true when kids aren't learning necessarily in the town where they live is that some of the family relationships that might provide aftercare or whatnot are not quite as convenient. And so being able to support that with after-school options and then a bus that's providing that transportation, was really important. We learned, through just supporting Ripton families as they're joining the Salisbury Community School community there. And then we talked about programming and staffing. The teams in Bridport and Shoreham, the instructional teams, came up with a model that LaShawn and Jenny shared with me that I was just incredibly impressed by. That provides a vision where essentially all of the instructional staff are kept from both buildings. They're brought into one building, and there are two teams, if you will, a K-1-2 team and a 3-4-5 team. And each of those teams has 3 classroom teachers who are teaching a single grade level and a support team of a special educator, an interventionist, and a math instructional specialist dedicated to only those 3 grades. So essentially the instructional team is doubled with half the work. If you think about how, the teachers are now supporting 2 grades of students and 2 grades of curriculum across all of the curricular areas that they work with, which is part of being an elementary school teacher. And the support teams, whether it's a special educator, an interventionist, or a math specialist, is supporting 6 grades. They're working K-6. So the vision that they presented has that split so that there's more focused assistance and more a tighter guaranteed and viable curriculum, which is the first underpinning of a successful school improvement effort, if you will. The second being a sense of collective efficacy, which these teams are able to create as they can come up with goals, data analysis relative to what their 3 developmental areas are looking at and the performance within those and how to move those forward. So, there'll be a slide that shows you the FTEs around that, but that was the piece of that. And that was something that, I think that was pretty impressive to the members that saw that, the members of the working group that saw that, and it actually began to turn this story from a place of worry to in a direction of hope, because it was a place where people began to get excited, about that possibility, and really feel like we could make a substantial difference without having to have more resources, for kids who need us to do that. So we then put that together with Emily's wizardry into a presentation that we began to share widely for feedback and comment. You can see in the blue dot that occurred, mostly in October through community presentations that we did in person in Bridport and Shoreham. And I also want to express gratitude for the select boards in both Shoreham and Bridport for hosting opportunities for the community to come together to understand more about what we were working through and to be able to offer, just sort of a facilitated, moderated opportunity so that people could have voice in that process. We also offered a survey which asked families whether or not they would support this K-5 preschool design, would support it with some changes, or just did not support it. And you can see in the blue dot that 37% of families in Shoreham who identified as having a student in grades K through 5 next year were either in support of this or in support with changes, and I'll talk about the themes around that in a minute. And in Bridport, 81% of the same families were favorable. The teacher feedback is overwhelmingly favorable with ideas for adjustments. And I want to make sure to make two things clear about that. One of them is, Molly Witters last board meeting, she talked about how sometimes her opinion is in conflict with her values. And that has come out for all of us in this process. Whenever we are talking about the academic benefits of this model versus what it means in terms of those grades no longer remaining in Shoreham in this process. And the teachers certainly have felt that, along the way. And I don't want to minimize that, by suggesting that their feedback leans in the direction of support. It does related to the fact that that assignment is one that is more doable and will give them a better sense of confidence to make those gains, but it does not diminish the other parts that are important, and I want to put a pin in that. I also want to say that, the Shoreham and Bridport community feedback listed here has Shoreham listed as 54% favorable and Bridport 91% favorable or favorable with changes. The demographic that spoke most favorably in Shoreham are people who identified as having children between birth and 5, and people who have students in MUHS or MUHS. So those count as community members because they don't have K-5 children, right? So those are the folks who are who kind of carried that number, if you will, in addition to people who are in the Shoreham community that do not have children. They've made a choice not to have children in the Shoreham Elementary School, either through homeschooling or through an independent option. One of the other things that I want to be sure to say relative to the feedback that has come that has suggested changes, like I could support this if there are so many wonderful ideas that have come up through that are reflective of a vision that has the bones to be able to communicate where this is intended to go, but intentionally steps back from some of the other details so as not to get ahead of the board. Because if this is not a direction that you would find it wise for us to take at this time, then we don't want to have developed a proposal that is out too far out in front of you in that respect. So rightly so, there are teachers across ACSD who have weighed in, who've said, hey, I have some ideas, I'd like to contribute, which is nice in thinking about the way, both as we're determining, where to go with Ripton Elementary School, and in this inquiry, we're doing good work coming together and looking out for each other and thinking about how those things might work as a whole. District-wide stakeholder feedback, as we did in Ripton, we opened up the feedback for people across the district to speak their minds. It was 84% favorable, also, with some of those ideas for adjustments as we go. So the next slide reflects visually what I talked about relative to the vision. It shows, the current state. On the left, those are the FTEs that are currently, which is full-time equivalents, or the percentage of a whole. So if someone is a 0.5 music, it means they're a half-time music teacher. So those are the staffing that are in each of the buildings now. And in the new design, as it is currently presented, there you can see the teams that I mentioned. And you can see that this is a school that would have an enrollment of approximately 100 students, give or take, and would and has some interesting pieces relative to the shared staff, that I'll talk about as we get to the parts that Matt is almost about to do. Go ahead, Matt. So in this slide, you can see the enrollment broken down by grade as we anticipate that it might be for 26-27. The kindergarten number reflects every kindergartner we can find at this moment. It's very common that not all of them materialize in that respect, but if they all did of the kindergartners that we can find, that's what we would have. It's common in this district where if you have a class that that is about that size, that you would have a paraeducator that would be dedicated, and that is in our budgetary thinking. You can also see a layout which is not going to be big enough for the audience here, but hopefully people that are looking remotely can see. That is of the Bridport school that is reconfigured. Thank you, Matt. With a classroom layout as LaShawn and Jenny work together to kind of finalize the best outcome. You can see that the youngest students are kind of concentrated there in the middle, closest to the places that they would have to go out to and get to, and that the school fairly easily accommodates what would be needed for those classrooms. The board, I do want to say that I would be encouraging that if the board is inclined to advise us that this is a direction that you would like to support us in going, that there's some policy work that I think needs to be done. And this isn't only relative to this question, but it's really thinking about the fact that we would have then 3 of our 4 smaller elementary schools with only room for single grade classrooms in the building, meaning we could no longer break it out. So if we had 25 kindergartners, we would not have room in Salisbury, Cornwall, or Bridport, as it is designed here, to have 2 kindergarten classes. So the policy work that I would want to ensure that the board undertakes, if this is a direction that we pursue, part of it is already going on, which is taking a look at the school attendance policy, C30, because there are some folks, we had, a parent make a note in the survey that said, that where they live in Shoreham is actually closer to one of our other schools rather than coming to Bridport, materially so. And so would it be possible, to have C30 allow them to be able to go that direction, which currently it wouldn't. So that is policy work that you would need to undertake, or I would advise that you would undertake. And then the class size policy right now, as you know, was revised to ensure that it's clear how the superintendent is to handle situations if the class minimums are not met. It is silent on how the superintendent handles the situation if the maximums are exceeded. And so that would be something that would be important that the policy committee and the full board attends to, prior to kindergarten enrollment and things of that nature, as we go. Go ahead, Matt. Okay, so this last one, I'll do the preliminary, and then Matt has a financial analysis that accompanies this slide on the next slide. What we've done is we've put three columns together for you. The left column are essentially the current FTEs, with the exception of paraeducators who are the same no matter what, and so they're not on this slide. As you know, paraeducators that relate to students with IEPs, those are determined across the district and related to where needs are, and each school of this size has 2 paraeducators that are general ed paraeducators, and we would expect that would be the case here as well. So. Go ahead.
They're on there.
They are?
Yeah.
Yes, the pairs are on
Tucked
there.
right under the classroom teacher.
Nice job, Matt.
So the special ed pairs are.
Thanks. Perfect. Okay. So you can see that they have 24.3 FTEs between the 2 schools right now. In going to a combined model, that FTE changes to 22.8, and the blue and the red indicate changes. So the red indicates an add, which is around professional behavioral support. We in this case, we are doing something that is increasingly happening in different parts of the state as you're reading in the news. But it's something that we need to pay careful transitional attention to. We are taking 2 equal size schools and we are putting them together, in terms of learning communities. If we move in this direction, that's going to create different social dynamics, hierarchies among kids, ways that kids are going to have to adjust, where they're learning in ways that are just asking different social and emotional things from them than we're doing so before. And so in anticipation of that, there's an addition of behavioral support consultation there to help the professional staff understand functional behavioral analysis with kids. So when something doesn't seem quite right, what is it that they might be trying to get or avoid, and what is the quickest strategy that can be put in place that can support those students. That also was considered relative to Ripton as they're joining Salisbury, with the addition of guidance staff, in Salisbury, which seemed to be the recommendation at that time, based on the conditions in that circumstance. Here, the thought is that we will need approximately half an FTE, at least in the planning stage, to have available as a support if needed. So otherwise, the blue are things that are changed. So in the arts movement and Spanish teachers, there's a net reduction of 0.2 FTE, which relates to comparable staffing levels compared to Cornwall and Salisbury, who are approximately the same size with the single grade configurations. There's only so much time that these folks can have with students, and so the net change is a loss of a 0.2 FTE. The principal, you'll see right now there are 2 principals. This model keeps 1.5 of those dedicated to this transition, which is something that, I would say is the thing that we got the second most questions about. The nurse is the most, and we'll get to that one. But the second most questions about in the survey and in the community forums. There's a lot of communication, there's a lot of planning. We learned as we were working to integrate students from Ripton into Salisbury Community School, there are transportation logistics that evolve. There will be new after-school programming that will be in place. There will be establishing new relationships likely with the Shoreham Rec Department, with students hopefully who can come, maybe even more of them that can come from that school to make sure that programming still stays in place. Other partners that are already having partnerships with those schools, those partnerships need attention to ensure that they are at least as successful as they are right now, if not more so, in this kind of transition. There are, our administrators are really appreciated by students in both schools, having those familiar faces there in order to be able to pull those transitions together, and in order to make sure that transitions, right, that are traditions that happen in both schools are just able to be given life in that way. We're lucky enough in Salisbury to have Tracy Harrington as the new principal there, who of course was a principal in Ripton, and so she's better able to do that. In that sense, because of the magnitude of this change, we've left 1.5 administrators here, which for the first year of this transition. The administrative assistant goes from 2 to 1, which we expect to be taken care of through retirement attrition, and then the school nurse. So each school has currently allocated in the room of requirements, if you remember our budget, our equity budget list, block 3.4 of a nurse. Now, sometimes, the nurses go where the greatest medical needs are, and so it doesn't always work out exactly as you plan. But that's what each school is allocated right now. We've upped that to a 0.5, which is really not a dramatic change, given that all of the students currently have access to a nurse, a couple days a week. They'll now have access to a nurse 2.5 days a week. However, many people added 0.4 and 0.4 to get 0.8, and so are worried that this is going to be a reduction in nursing, and that's not a popular piece. So, of course, the way we staff anything, I think to one of the points that Steve made, earlier this fall, is up to the board, and that can come through budgeting. We might decide we need more nursing in all of our schools, as we approach the FY27 budget. But that's why it has a star, and why it's a little bit different. So those FTEs are 22.8. The last column really responds to the question of, okay, if we did not make this move, and you as a board felt that the best guidance you could give us is that you wanted us to stay in multi-grade classrooms, which we have a reminder of a K1, a 2-3, and a 4-5 in each school. So if we have more students come in, we would have 2 K1s, for example, but we would maintain that structure to try to eliminate the toggling of curricular bumps that we think has really been the primary culprit of where we are right now in the first place. You asked, I think someone might have asked along the way, either in a community forum or one of you, or maybe I thought of it myself, I don't know. It was, okay, well, what would the alternative be? And how much, what FTEs would that take? What would that look like? And really, the only alternative that the folks with primary expertise that I consulted, and that my primary expertise is middle school, right? So I can have a foundational basis of that, but I know better than to design elementary approaches without involving folks with elementary expertise. And so the feeling is the only other possible option that we might think about is going back to a strategy that we've referred to here as a compartmental model, where maybe even given when the heavier work takes place, grades 2 through 5 would have specialists. So we would be adding 3 FTEs across the buildings, so that each grade could be learning with a specialist in math and in literacy, and then separately, with their IB units that combine the social studies and the science, so that we were able to pull in those high leverage strategies right away. That was something that was tried I don't know. I recall it as probably the mid 90s. It might, maybe I'm not quite right about that, but we have almost universally moved away from that in primary education, because we lose the coherence of the whole child. Because now each child has, maybe 4, 5, 6 adults that they're interacting with. If you think about their PE teacher and their art teacher and their music teacher and all of those kinds of things, and you lose the continuity. And there's so much that magical elementary school teachers do to embed social and emotional development and community contributions and all of those pieces that show up in our learning profile in academics, that it really has been debunked as a way forward. However, it's here, and in order to do that, we would need 27.3 FTEs. Matt has the next slide, which tells you essentially the cost.
And it costs more.
Yes, of this model. Go ahead.
So here's the same 3 models that we just walked through the FTEs of, with some details on the cost estimates. We're looking at 2 different states for costs here. One would be the year 1 state, as we just looked at the plan for, and then the other thing this slide looks at is what potential savings in the future would the plan create in terms of tapering investments that could get realized based on outcomes and stability as those things establish themselves. So in the current model, we've got that $2.38 million estimate for the 24.3 FTEs. You can see here, by shedding a few FTEs in the combined model, there's a proposed savings of about 160,000 forecast, whereas in the compartmental model, adding 3 teachers to the mix would bring in substantial new money there.
With their salary and benefits.
Correct.
Yeah.
And these are all sort of rough estimates, of course. The next row looks at the tapering investments to say, all right, from that initial upper limit, most expensive potential state, what would be possible to take off in due time? So, for instance, all of our instructional specialists, it's a well-known fact, have been touted as the ones who will work themselves out of a job in 3 years by creating the instructional capacity which they are charged with. So in each one of the models, those positions would be expected to taper as those investments mature. In the combined model, you also have some FTEs which are included in the transitional support, which would stand to either be realized as savings as they come down to the existing Salisbury, Cornwall numbers, or equalized in some other way. You know, sort of our 100 school model coming up a little bit or coming down a little bit. But the reason that they're in this block is because they could be realized coming down to where our existing Cornwall and Salisbury models have them right now. So that's the other half FTE principal, 2/10 of AMS, 4/10 of library, 1 special educator. And, you know, special educators are almost in a different class because they follow individualized needs, so that's a little bit of a tougher one, but you know, we can say that 1 special educator per school of 100 kids is a pretty standard staffing rule. 2/10 of a counselor, that temporary behavioral support position that Dr. Baker spoke about, and then 1 of the 2 interventionists that they would have in the initial transition. So again, various degrees of narrative and storyline would lead to each one of those tapering in their own way, but they're on there because they could, and combined they represent 5.8 FTEs. In the compartmental model, we just mentioned that the 3 teachers that we added in the top wouldn't taper because by being there, they would establish instructional roles. And so the idea of being there 1 year and then not being there the next year would create a cliff, right? So we wouldn't want to, we would want to report that in that model. So we then summed up what the FTEs are and corresponding funds for those expenses, and then created a tapering adjusted total cost there. So each one of those tapering costs on the bottom is compared to the current model. Combined model shows the potential additional savings on top of that 160 of 495,000, and an additional 304 stays with the compartmental model.
And the important thing about this slide is that this is not an endeavor that is related to cost. This is solely developed as a strategy to respond to gaps that we are seeing in curricular understanding among the majority of students in both schools, in both ELA and math. And therefore, the resources are kept and added that we feel would best both help to support and manage a transition of this magnitude, and also to be able to provide the academic supports that will augment teachers having a more manageable assignment, as they have requested. So we don't have too many more here. Go ahead, Matt. We haven't talked about pre-K, and part of that is because, when you are ready to make this decision, which is on your board work plan for the 24th of November, not for tonight. Tonight is about questions and clarification and understanding. If you are not going to advise us that this is a time to have an intervention of this kind for K through 5, then we really would not be proposing the relocation of a preschool. And so although there is a team that has begun that work, and there's information around that, really we're just presenting to you tonight some basics, which is that we seem pretty confident that our licensing folks will clear 3 classrooms. They made Bruce aware of the fact that none of those classrooms had hot water, and that's already actually been fixed. Not because we think there's going to be preschool in there or not, but because they didn't have hot water. So that's Yeah, exactly. So that was a very easy, shift to make. So, so that's taken care of. There's about $40,000 of fit-up cost that we assume would be the case for at least a second classroom. And each classroom is about $200,000 worth of staffing. We have one in our current budget now. We would be looking in FY27 potentially to add another one in that budget, which, if you remember the 160 that we saved, right, in the K-5, so it goes there. So it's a cost neutral proposal. There are all kinds of other funding unique aspects to pre-K. For example, the district gets a $4,000 voucher for every pre-K student. If they go somewhere else, we send that voucher somewhere else. If they stay with us, then we keep it. So if we have students who are coming into this program that are going somewhere else, then we're able to actually use those dollars to offset some of that extra cost. And so there are all those intricacies that would take it we would want to look into. There are a number of folks that have come forward that have talked about the benefits of establishing an early childhood partnership that could utilize some of the other parts of that building potentially, so that we might be able to make some inroads in either after school care that extends beyond the preschool time, which is a model that Addison Northwest utilizes, with private folks that are supporting that, or even, some infant to toddler care, depending upon, it's a little complicated to pull those different licenses in the same place. And if this is an area that we go, we have excellent preschool teachers and a preschool coordinator and folks who actually came to the work group who have knowledge of this world, and so we would set them on this task to begin to flesh those details out, in a manner that reflected their expertise, which again we have not done now, so as not to get ahead of the board in terms of your preference. The last thing that I want to just speak to before sort of opening it up to questions is some Act 73 context notes. And these are things that came up both in the in-person community meetings and a little bit on the survey. And so I just thought it would be helpful to speak to them here. One, obviously, worry. I mean, it seems like a lot of things in the state and federal government are in flux at the moment, and that makes it very hard to focus on the work at hand with the same level of stability that we have felt in the past. However, I am very confident strong classrooms will always be needed. It's wherever they are, they will always be needed. And so cultivating those deliberately within our district is good work. And so I think that transcends any action the state may take as a result of Act 73. VT cap or some other state assessment, it will be a consistent measure. And as I said, across 4 large-scale assessments in the state that I'm personally familiar with, they don't change that much, So having a classroom orientation that also allows us to meet proficiency goals set in the strategic plan that relate to VT cap is reasonable, and I think it is something that we can work with consistently and continue to talk about in a way that feels reliable. In Act 73, currently school consolidation cannot force capital debt. So there's some that worry that if these groups of kids come together to learn together, then in 3 years are they going to have to then go somewhere else, because the state is going to say that schools that are 100 students are too small, and so districts are going to have to then put schools together where there can be 200 students. And in reality, in our district, it would be very, very challenging to do that without incurring capital debt, as you're learning, through our capital improvement planning. So I don't think there's much chance of that. Small by necessity versus small by choice, is a something the state board is entertaining rulemaking around right now. I would not be surprised if currently both Bridport and Shoreham in their current enrollment patterns would be considered small by choice, given that they are only 9 minutes from each other. So I would say that there is probably less likelihood of change for the students in this new design than there would be in the current design if nothing else changes in the Act 73 world. Peter Conlon says that it's a fool's errand to try to anticipate all of this, and I think he's right about that. But there were some questions that came up, and so this is my best thinking about those questions. I guess the last thing that I would say to you as a board is that the administration is not here to put pressure on you to determine that our step forward is to move forward in this new configuration or to stay where we are. It is our recommendation that if we are to make the greatest gains for the largest number of students in the shortest period of time in a manner that supports our teaching staff most effectively, the single grade option is the way to do that. If you do not feel that it is wise to go about that at this time, then we will proceed as we are. And there's no doubt that our staff is in it to win it, and the kids will make gains. They will make gains. Whether or not those gains are as much as they could make, feels doubtful to me. But there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees no matter what we do, and. So I think that's probably enough. Like I say, you have more detailed slides there that you can draw from, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have or phone any number of a plethora of friends that are in this audience to help, as we go. Tonight is really about ensuring you have an opportunity to build understanding. If there are questions that we can't come up with an answer to but are important, we will do that. And we will put something on the agenda for next week as just a quick question answer time. So we'll bring that information back to you next week.
Questions? Okay, Steve, and then Ellen, and then Jason.
So I heartily applaud you for looking at this from the standpoint of what's going to benefit students the most. When I saw those numbers about Bridport and Shoreham, especially Bridport, my emergency bells were going off as this is the critical thing that we need to fix in this district. And I'm going to say something that many people are going to be surprised at. I'm normally the voice of fiscal responsibility, but my question is, why are we not spending more? Why are we not increasing staff to fix these deficits? Because I think that's something that we should look at. If we need to make up these deficits right now, I think we need more people to do it. And I also would observe that the staff at the schools have said that this is a good direction for them. And I listen to what teachers say they need. So my question is, why not more resources to fix this problem, I guess?
Yep, and my commitment to you, if this is a direction that you feel is important for us to take, is that the final proposal that comes to you through the budget process will include everything that we believe is needed. Sometimes you can have too many staff, right? And you're not. You're kind of tripping over each other, and it makes it difficult to be in a rhythm, if you are working with students. But it's really important to have the right staff in the right way. And I think this is a good vision. I think the resources here in terms of dollars are probably the right dollars, but there are teams of people who are interested in taking these to the next detailed level, and we we await the board's permission to do that if you feel this is a direction we can go. So we will not bring you something if we feel that there is something that is not appearing right now that comes out in those conversations. And I'll give you an example of something. There was a great request that came in the survey about, a para that relates specifically to SLP services, because we have a number of students, increasingly across the district, of course, who are who have speech and language delays, and having a para that is able to do that in a school of this size would be able to ensure that more students are able to access those in rapid fire, and there's a connection between speech and language delays and literacy achievement. And so that's an example of something that's come up in the forum, that those are the ideas that once, if you feel this is the right way to go, once you give that green light, all those conversations will happen. Until that time, it doesn't feel quite right to put those fine dots on them. Yeah.
Helen?
Yeah, similar to Steve, I was questioning and curious about the reduction in FTEs. So I was happy to hear that it was a tapered idea, and that it sounds like it's nothing's a done deal, obviously, but that there's potential for reconsidering whether or not the reduction, particularly around special education and interventionists, could be avoided, particularly given the concern that was raised, I think, in the family surveys around this feeling like a fiscal imperative rather than an academic imperative. So,
which it is decidedly not. Yes.
The other thing I was curious about is if you have any sense, I know it's early days on the pre-K planning, but is there a need? Is the need there for those pre-K slots? Generally, I think in Addison County, there's less of a demand on pre-K positions. And if I remember from the presentation we got, I don't remember when, a year ago on pre-K, the vast majority of our kindergartners have been to pre-kindergarten already. So there is, and I know there's an expansion planned for Otter Creek. And so a lot of pre-K slots are opening up. Just to put on the table, I think infant to toddler is a profound unmet need, and also after school. So I'm generally interested to hear more about the demand that you all are seeing if this moves forward, and how potentially additional space along these lines can be utilized to meet more county needs. Pre-K is great, and then also other forms of childcare and after-school care that might be in high demand.
Yep, I'll try to take them in order. So there would be no intention to reduce any staff until the academic goals have been met, and only if it feels that they're not needed anymore, right? Because that is the expectation, that once we get to where we need to go, and we've got those strong classrooms in place, and they're stabilized, that will enable us to sort of come back to baseline, if you will. The second point that you raised about pre-K is and Ashley is unfortunately ill tonight, or I would have her answer this. She feels, based on the information that she has, that particularly in that part of the county, there is a need, and that need comes not only from folks that are already within our district, but it comes from folks that are just south of us, and in Whiting, so I think she did feel that there was a need, and that was part of the analysis about whether that expansion of that program into a second classroom would work. The third thing that I'm thinking about relative to your points, Ellen, is that when families are engaging in a private preschool, the district pays 10 hours of that time. So a family either has to prepay the other time that they're there, or there is the child subsidy that goes to families to offset the other hours. Our preschool program, is probably 25 to 30 hours a week, depending upon, what the team would determine, at least as much as that. There actually was some great points brought up around, well, could we have, for example, one classroom be full-time and another be kind of part-time, so families could begin to bring students to pre-K a little bit at a time, as opposed to enrolling them all the time, which might be too much for a 3-year-old. So it's the reason that public school preschools are preferred is that they are more hours without family pocket. The other thing lurking in the background is that there is legislation that is already passed that indicates that school districts will be required to take on 4-year-olds. No one can make sense of that in our current discussions at the state level. And kindergarten isn't mandated as it is, so some of that is, it hasn't moved forward, but it showed up in the secretary's presentation to the redistricting task force today. So that's just something to be aware of.
Yeah. Jason and then Steve.
So my first reaction is I'm thrilled that we're taking action to address an acute need and concern. It's fantastic. What gives me pause is 37% favorability among K-5 Shoreham families with K-5 students and 54% favorability among the Shoreham community in general. That does not seem like enough support to make this successful.
Yeah, I will say that I think it's as much support as we will get. I have appreciated getting to know the Shoreham community, and I have found to a person that the people that have approached me and engaged in this process from Shoreham are as concerned about making progress as we are. I think the desire for the others that are feeling differently is that the model that we currently have is allowed to run for some time so that we can determine if that can be successful. I think that is the preferred choice. So, that would mean that if we're thinking about VT cap as that measure that links up with how we're defining strong classrooms, we don't get results from VT cap until the summer. So this year's good work will be reflected in results we get in the summer. My guess is the Shoreham community would certainly want another year of time to those who are feeling differently, which means that it will be the summer of 2027 before we have another set of results. And it's really the fall of 2028 before an intervention of this nature could be put in place, because there's not time to turn on a dime. This takes planning. What we've learned from our experience with students living in Ripton, where that decision was made the very end of March, is that that we only had 2 and a little bit of months of school left to be able to create the joint community, to be able to adjust curricular expectations, really prepare students and families well for transitioning into a new school. We don't want less time than we have right now. Right now we have 9 months to be able to make those preparations and that transition, which is directly related to feedback that came in the first iteration of looking at single grade pieces. So I would say that I want to make sure to characterize the people that I have interacted with in Shoreham as being equally worried and deeply committed to ensuring that kids are doing well. I think the timing feels different. They would appreciate opportunities to have this last longer and have as many supports as we can to be supporting those classrooms in their current form.
Okay, Steve, and then Mary.
Mary,
I have
a few thoughts. I'll try to put them together. One, I heard the line earlier that turning this from a place of worry to a place of hope. And I think we can get to a place of hope, but this for me personally, is still kind of in the worry phase, and I think may still be. So just wanted to say that. The other one, there was a slide earlier that said, does inequitable opportunity exist? And as a board, I hope we all think about that. And does something exist? You know, inequitable opportunity is not like gravity. It's not something that just exists. This is a system that has been created, and I would challenge us all as board members to ask why that would be the case, because it's not something that just inherently exists. So I think we should dig into that. I really appreciate some of my other board members' conversations looking at this slide and figuring out more of the why. There's a connection to multi-grade classrooms that's kind of indicated through this conversation. And I do want to point out, as far as I understand the data, that some of our districts' best results, I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, come from multi-grade classrooms. And so I just want to acknowledge that for what it's worth. I'm not an educator. If somebody else wants to correct me, please do. If I get the data wrong, Courtney, you could let me know. And then I do just struggle, like here we are in a challenging situation. I can appreciate we're trying to engage the community, but it's kind of like why do you have this problem? And I think as a board, we may want to grab that bull more by the horns and say, why do we have this problem? It's not fair to look at a community and ask that question for a ship that we steer. And I just, I find it, the compartmental model, the fact that that is the only solution that could exist here when we're in a district that has multi-grade classrooms that are very successful, just kind of confuses me. So I really appreciate bringing the community into it, the educators. It's hard to weigh this one. There's a lot to it, I feel.
I'd like to speak to your concerns. The first one I'd like to speak to is the sense of why do you have this problem? And I want to be very clear that that is not the way that I or anyone that is part of this process has presented that. And I know that you expect that to be true. Our inquiry has been more about why is this scenario existing here? And it's not because the kids are different. The kids are the same as kids we have everywhere throughout the district. So why is that existing here? And so if I misspoke in any way that gave you that impression, I just wanted to be sure to clear that up. I very much appreciate your perspective that why have we allowed that? Why have we allowed it? And I, in fairness to the board, I would say that to my knowledge, this is the first time it has come to light to this point. At least I don't know it, and I've not seen evidence of when the board has been able to analyze data by school that would have shown this in the past. The second thing I want to speak to more comprehensively is multi-grade classrooms, and I want to be really clear about this. Multi-grade classrooms in and of themselves are wonderful places. I taught in them. I loved the model. Melissa Giroux received a Distinguished Service Award for her exemplary performance in a multi-grade classroom of 3 grades that had outstanding results in Ripton. And we have multi-grade classrooms that have existed in Weybridge School for decades that perform very well. The scenario here, this is not a referendum about whether multi-grade classrooms are better than single-grade classrooms at all. I would be very happy to have multi-grade classrooms throughout this district everywhere for all their educational benefits if the educators felt comfortable with that assignment and if they were excited about moving that forward and felt that it was the best thing in order to make the gains that they are the primary instrument to design that need to happen for the students that are in their care. That is not the situation in this case. In this case, it is my opinion that asking these educators to maintain multi-grade classrooms is an unfair assignment. They are already saying it is something that they are not sure that they are going to be able to maintain with the same degree of success that they feel they could bring to a single grade classroom. They're saying that now. They have said it consistently over 9 months, despite the heaviest of hearts of understanding what that might mean. I respect that. I have protected them through that. And it is an important part of this recommendation at this time. And I just want to be clear about that. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to it.
Mary Heather.
Yeah, I guess I want to follow up on that as well. I think there is a very big distinction between multi-grade in Ripton and multi-grade in Shoreham and Bridport, even just in the consistency of multi-grade and the likelihood of curriculum gaps in schools that have unpredictable multi-grade classrooms versus no gaps in schools that have very predictable multi-grade classrooms with teachers and administration who have practiced this for decades. So I just don't think that's really a fair comparison. It's kind of apples and oranges. And so to say, well, it works there is just not recognizing the conditions on the ground in Bridport and Shoreham. The other thing, I guess I have a couple of questions about the pre-K. I'm wondering if pre-K or school readiness was a component that was investigated as part of this, what's happening on the ground and whether there is a difference in that between our schools. And I can't help but wonder whether a specific pre-K investment is part of what needs to be done to address this sort of a larger thing. But I don't know that there are data that exist, but it's a question I have. It seems to me that school readiness from the get-go, if you've got kids who are entering a kindergarten system at a different level, that's going to make it all the harder for them to make similar strides in the future. So that would be a data point that I'd be interested in knowing, and certainly supportive of making an additional pre-K investment if that is in fact part of what's going on. I guess the other thing is that I'm wondering, with respect to Jason's question about community support. I know in the appendix, looking at the pie charts and the specific details about people's either supportive or supportive with conditions, I'm wondering about the conditions for support and the degree to which certainty or assurance that some of these conditions can be addressed and honored would make considerable changes in the amount of people who support this effort. Recognizing that the whole reason we're doing this is to address this this need to bring our kids up. And I guess I do want you to speak on that, just like what conditions are there. But before I give up the floor, I guess the other thing that's coming to mind for me is just the Act 73 context and the reality that we're facing as a district and as a state, and the changes that are coming. I remember a while back, maybe a month or so ago, when we were just talking about Act 73, asking Dr. Baker, how do we ready ourselves for this change? How do we prepare our communities, our kids, our classrooms for the possibility of this big administrative change? And I feel like we are in a position, and this is kind of an example of knowing that we have an issue that we want to address as a district, and having the agency to do so, And also knowing that other changes are coming that could provide even more disruption than we have experienced. And it seems to me that our utmost responsibility is to provide the most stability and the greatest possibility for our kids to weather these changes well and either float when this wave comes so that they're not, sinking or getting washed away when this wave comes, and it is coming. And so I feel like, some of the reticence is a lot of grief and really valid feelings about the changes that are happening to our state, and they are to be acknowledged, and I think we all are frustrated with it. But I think we have to prepare our kids and our classrooms, and I feel like, these are important changes to consider and important investments to make to kind of arm our kids with the best possibility of doing well. So if you wouldn't mind responding to my first initial thing about the conditions, that'd be helpful.
I could take them all backwards. I think one connecting point that you bring up is that you have currently under Act 73 2 years of funding that is approved by our voters. After that, the foundation formula could go into play. It's scheduled to go into play for FY29, right, Matt? Yes, foundation formula.
Correct.
Just checking if he's still with us. So
No, I get my calendar and fiscal years mixed up.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so
we have 2 more budgets, right? This one and then FY28.
Yeah.
So we have 2 more under our control. So the number of people that you'd like, the way to go about that is within our control right now. It will not be within our control under a foundation formula to the same extent. We will be getting a certain amount per district, whatever district that entity that is, and then we will have to allocate that so that if we are putting more in one school, then another school might not get, the same. I mean, that's a point of controversy about the foundation formula. So Mary Heather, that ties to your last point. The point prior to that was around pre-K and readiness, and maybe I could roll those together by saying that I want to make sure to be clear that there are students everywhere in the district who are as ready or as unready, if you will, or not quite ready for kindergarten as exist in Bridport and Shoreham. This need to ensure that we can accelerate student growth is not because the students in Bridport or Shoreham are coming to school less ready as a whole than students anywhere else in the district. There are students in other parts of the district everywhere that have less readiness when they arrive for kindergarten. What we want to see in order to have one way, to Steve's point, of determining an equitable opportunity is to see that anyone who might not be quite ready that lands anywhere in the district has the same chance of success, because of the programming and the supports that we're able to offer them. So that said, Mary Heather, we have not looked at school readiness data because of that point, because we're able to assist kids all over the district, that have varying degrees of readiness in that respect. I think that was all of it.
Okay, Tricia, Ron, I'm going to let them go first, and then
just get my name on the list.
Yep, got it.
Cute.
Well, I just wanted to voice a concern which you covered in the encouraging policy work, and pointing out that there's no room in the building to create multiple classrooms within a grade. And looking at, if every kindergartner were to attend, a class of 20 kindergartners is huge. Even with, one adult and one classroom assistant. I know a few years ago when Mary Hogan had the 18 18 kindergarten classrooms, that was a rough year. And of course, Mary Hogan is not, they're not the same. However, it makes me nervous not having the flexibility to add classrooms if needed.
The policy work I would absolutely recommend that we do the policy work if you see fit to go in this direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Right. I really appreciate all the work that went into this, both kind of with the community and kind of the way it was presented here today. I think I have no doubt that kind of the best of intentions went into making this plan or this proposal. I appreciate that. I'm still stuck on that 37% number as well. I imagine that some of you are as well. And I wonder why you think that is where it is, why you think that's the highest it will go. And I'm going to keep going, and then hopefully you can get back to that one. I'm also wondering how Ripton students are doing in Salisbury, because I think this kind of change will be measured by kind of the way we follow up and the way we track those kinds of shifts. I don't want to put Christina on the spot, but I also really wonder how you're thinking about this discussion in the kind of multi-grade classroom versus single-grade classroom question. I was also a little bit unclear on the question of toggling and how exactly this shift would change that. And is this really, and why, in specific, why is this the best solution to that problem? I think I'll stop there.
I was gonna say, if you keep going, Ron, I'm gonna need some help. So
I can recap.
No, it's okay. So if we go backwards, the problem that Courtney had a beautiful presentation that sort of led us to understand in June of 2024 that exists primarily it existed in Bridport and Shoreham, in many places, much more so than in any of the other schools, with Ripton being a possible exception just in the last couple of years, is when you have unstable enrollment. So you have one kindergarten one year, 10 kindergartners the next year, 3 kindergartners a year after that. You have a K1, and then what? So you have different grade configurations that are unstable. So there are 2 ways to fix that. One way is by having established multi-grade scenarios like we do right now in Weybridge, Shoreham, and Bridport, which is a K1, a 2, 3, and a 4, 5. That's okay as long as you don't get 20 kindergartners, right? You can maintain that as long as the number of students that you're getting in each class is relatively stable, even if it's small. And remember, the enrollments, at least in Shoreham, right, have dropped pretty substantially over the last 5 years or so. So Weybridge has had stable enrollment, so that they've been able to maintain their K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over those decades. So that's one way of solving it. The other way of solving it is to have single grades. Single grades are difficult in smaller schools because they don't meet the class size policy, which was going on for a number of years, where sometimes there would be a single grade of 6, right, or 7, and so they don't meet the class size policy, which has learning environment implications and fiscal implications as well, in that sense. So in this case, this change is not to bring stability. We arguably at least have a model for stability in what we have right now. It is to ensure that the teaching assignment that relates to the curricular implementation is as uncomplicated as possible, as straightforward as possible, for the teachers that will need to do that work. And also, in having the single grades, you can focus on a single curricular area, developmental area, each year. So that, I didn't say that quite right. You might have 3 developmental areas in any grade, right? So, but you just have one set that you're working with in each year, as opposed to 2 grades where you've got, at least 5, and so it narrows the assignment so that it enhances the focus and enhances the effectiveness. That's not to say that multi-grade classrooms are not effective, and I'd be happy to have Christina share her perspective about that. It's in this instance in support of these educators doing the job that is in front of them. This is an intervention that is specific to what these students demonstrate that they need, and these educators have asked for right now. Yeah. Did you want to add something, Christina?
I don't think much to what you said. I think that Weybridge has been at it for a long time. I do want to correct one thing. It's only been in the last few years that we've had stable combinations, grade levels. And that's been based more on the view that all teachers in the building should teach any grade that we have, because that gives them the greatest breadth and depth of curriculum knowledge. So they're not dumbfounded or weren't dumbfounded by, oh my gosh, I've got to teach this grade level this year, that we had a continuum of what we were doing. But I do think it's very difficult to imagine or create a situation where the teachers within the district at this point want to make the change to multi-grade. I think it's a big lift. It's certainly doable. Multi-age actually has huge benefits to it, and I could go into that in great detail, but that's a bigger discussion. It works very well. I'll say one thing about it: it causes teachers to step away from program. Not that we don't use the programs, but we're looking at the students in front of us and the development of concept across the years, as opposed to this is the first grade curriculum. It's just, this is the way this subject area, this discipline develops. These are the skills that they develop in this range. So it opens up a greater focus on who's in front of you rather than a reliance on program.
Did I cover it all?
No.
What's
I was asking about Ripton and how Ripton students are doing.
Yes, so they're generally doing well, and more specific information about that is probably for another meeting. So,
Alan.
I just want to make one point and then ask if we can amend the agenda to allow for public comment to happen earlier, because it's getting quite late, and my assumption is that there are people in the room who would like to speak to this issue before we have another big presentation. But just to point out that I think that our district has sporadically enforced our school or class size policy. The class size policy by numbers did not change when we revised it last spring. The numbers of what the minimum and the maximum were not changed by this board or recent versions of this board, but the enforcement of that policy became more consistent. And so I believe there was a time when there were single grade classrooms in Bridport and Shoreham that were just smaller than our class policy technically allowed, but the district allowed it. And so this is to some degree a challenge of our making in that we have decided to not invest in allowing for smaller classes that would be single grade classrooms in these schools. We are trying to, and this came up a lot in our budget discussion last year, from a fiscal perspective, we decided to enforce the D6 policy so that those grades would be combined. I personally do think that there's probably value in consistency and predictability in school populations, that if you look historically over the last 10 years, even accounting for the 6th grade move to MUMS, has fluctuated greatly in our smaller schools across the board. In some cases, increases and decreases. My assumption is a lot of that's related to real estate. And that's a very unpredictable market. So it feels valuable for us to try to achieve some consistency in what everyone can expect. But we are making the policy, to what you were saying before, Steve, not so much on the iniquities, but we're making the policies that are driving these changes. They're also not coming from on high. But I do wonder if we can allow for public comment to happen a bit earlier in the night, or introduce a new public comment period because it's getting quite late.
We can take that up. But let's finish what we're doing here. Is there other questions? Comments? And I would like to say, I haven't spoken, so then I'll speak and then I'll let Mary Heather. This compartmental was a question I had asked. Because when I look at the situation where the gain is required, I asked the question, well, if we kept it the way it is with the multi-grade classrooms, what additional resources, if any, could we put there to lift up the kids? Because they have to be lifted up, right? It's a disservice of us to ignore that problem, right? And if in fact the levels of, the need was less, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and the multi-grade classrooms would be just fine with the staffing that's there. So I asked that question. When I looked at, like the model, being a math person with ed background, I was like, knowing how hard it is, for some kids and even instructors and teachers to really grasp math, right? Seeing the interventionist, the math specialist for K1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5 excited me, I have to say, just being a math person, because you would have that much more really specialization at that age, right? And so the question I had is it feasible, and how much would it cost if we did something like that? And that's kind of what drove it and my motivation for doing it, because it breaks my heart to see kids struggling, and it's going to follow them the rest of their lives. So we have, from my perspective, to figure out something to do here, because it'll impact these kids for the rest of their lives, right? And so, that's, why that was on the chart. Okay, Mary Heather?
Yeah, and you may have already answered this, Dr. Baker, but in my first question I mentioned the conditional support. Did you already answer the sort of conditions that were identified by folks who were like, I could support this if?
No,
Okay.
I forgot that one.
Okay, thank you. If you wouldn't mind.
Nope. The things that were requested most were technical changes, like more nursing, or ensuring that there was, an opportunity for kids to be able to go, all of them to get to Middlebury at the end of the day, because apparently some of them can ride a bus into Middlebury at the end of the day if their bus driver drives to Middlebury. We uncovered this, which sounds like a great gig, and so the thought was, well, everybody should have that. Or ensuring that, there are rides for students to be able to get, to the ARC program in Shoreham or the rec department or things like that, so that there was nothing, and I think the themes are covered in the longer document that you have. There was nothing presented that was not a technical change that was doable and had very little cost associated with it. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. And thank you all for absorbing my passion for this work. It's been a while since, I've shared something with you that I think is important, and I appreciate your questions. It's important that we get all of the information out, as much as we can.
Okay, Ron.
Okay, last question from me, I promise. What are we doing right now in Shoreham and Bridport this school year? And how will we know if it's working, and when will we know if it's working to improve?
You ready?
Yeah, Matt, I think it's slide 2, can we go back? These are some of the things, and I'd also say there are Bridport and Shoreham administrators and teachers in the room, but a few things, yeah, thank you, that I would point to. First is some growth on all of the slides that had both the VTCAP and the screening results, which is important to mention. If you look right there at Bridport, we've had a pretty substantial focus on early literacy and literacy in general in this district for the last 5 to 6 years, and that coupled with some really intentional shifts and changes and leadership there is growth happening there, and those are some factors that I would attribute to that growth. The addition of the math instructional specialists this year, not just in Bridport and Shoreham, but in 5 of our elementary schools, really targeted investments in math PD during the school day for teachers, include also opportunities over the summer that teachers can elect into, and a special course through Middlebury College taught by Tracy Weston just for our math instructional specialists and curriculum coordinators focused on math dialogue and math strategies. Those are all inputs that we're hoping, go to the next slide. Oh wait, this is math. No, sorry, yes, you were on the right side. We're hoping we'll see some of that same growth we were seeing in ELA and math in the future.
And when would we know that, you think? By the summer, I guess?
I would assume we would see some growth in the VTCAP that the kids take this spring.
I don't know if I named all the things. I think on the ground every day our educators in these buildings are thinking about what are we doing. I don't know if
Jenny, is there anything you want to add, or Andrea?
I think at Bridport, we have intentionally put in embedded PD every Friday for teachers with our instructional specialist and curriculum coordinator, where they are learning together and building that collective efficacy, as well as the math instructional specialist is in every classroom for every math class, and it's pretty magical, as well as our academic interventionist, who is very knowledgeable in early literacy, is also doing a ton of work in our school, and so we put a lot in, as well as LaShawn, Courtney, and I wrote a grant this past summer for Bridport and Shoreham to have summer programming, which part of that was an OGAP training, which we're having follow-up days as well this fall and spring, and that's been pretty instrumental in our math practices at Bridport. So there's a lot of things, great things happening at Bridport that I can speak to, and I know for a fact there's lots of awesome things happening at Shoreham too that mirror what we're doing at Bridport. We share a lot of staff and we talk a lot, and yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, so we'll move forward. Oh, let's finish the superintendent report. She has 2 more items on it, and then we can entertain the question about moving up public comment.
Okay, they're quick. As soon as I find the right thing.
In the student. I have it. Oh, okay.
All right, so Matt, do you want to just give a review or update as to where we are in terms of trying to help with the breach in SNAP benefits across the district?
If anybody saw the spotlight today, you've already gotten the short version of this, but as you all have doubtlessly heard through the news, it's kind of a messy and shifty and evolving situation. Just heard a new update on the radio right way over here, which was that the guidance for states to reverse course on funding SNAP benefits was meant to target those states that had given federal money ahead of time, but Vermont used its own money, and so the aid that has hit people's accounts this week is okay and allowed to go through. And so what we did last week was identified a shortfall in SNAP funding for families who receive supplemental nutrition assistance, and recognized that in order to get through the week, we needed to do something to help out, to send food home. And so we built a really quick program on the fly. Big thanks to the principals and especially Jen, who invented a spreadsheet that tracked students across all schools, tracked siblings so that we weren't duplicating efforts, and Steve and his teams for taking that spreadsheet and turning it into these amazing meal boxes that went home with kids every day last week. This week, we've done a soft taper on that program. We've got principals keeping an eye on any kind of lingering need, but have largely passed the torch back to the community aid organizations to do their thing, knowing that the state's funding should be there for people, but also knowing that what was a sprint last week could turn into a long distance event anytime soon, and that we may need to be in a position to adapt and create another solution. So kind of in a holding pattern on that regard.
We also appreciate partnership from the Middlebury Co-op. There were some folks who were able to donate funds to the effort, and we were able to pass those sort of cards and resources along to our families through the efforts of the folks at the Middlebury Co-op. So that was helpful.
Yeah, there was one anonymous donor that passed along additional help for families. The only other thing I'll note is that historically this time of the year we've identified the benefits for free adult meals through our food service program as a way to sort of boost morale and get people to the finish line heading into the holiday break. That program and its funding kind of got suspended in order to make this one possible, and so the ability to create opportunities to bridge this divide it's sort of well understood that happens at the expense of being able to provide that service for adults during this time of the year, and that in an indirect way it allows members of our district to be the agents who helped make it possible. So.
We do have a number of our staff who appreciate this time of year when the lunches are supported, and so we will be, as long as we don't have any other gaps in SNAP benefits, we'll be able to support lunches beginning the week of the 17th, for our staff, which I think will be greatly appreciated, and we're glad to be able to do that. The Act 73 update.
Before we get into this one, that's a good. It's kind of a good segue. I do want to acknowledge the fact I got an email about this in my inbox November 2nd, and then it said, we plan to support families beginning tomorrow, 11/3. So that's one day later, and it's just impressive. And given the larger education context, Act 73, these conversations, everything else going on, the fact that as a district we are able to help fill that role. I don't know that we can quite make it whole or anything like that, but I just really appreciate you putting the energy into stepping into that, and just coming up with a plan. So thank you. And to all of the other people, I know it's you're organizing, and then folks there and the nutrition teams are making it happen. So thank you to all of you who made it happen.
That's, the principals were on a call that night, and Steve Marinelli was brainstorming with Matt. We're lucky enough to have Matt have also a hospitality background, so he's a good partner in that. And the other thing was that, there were people locally who who know the community partners, and so we could get a sense as to what that looked like as well. And also had playbooks for this, like Jen Kravitz and the spreadsheet that she had, and the things like, well, hey, we know how to do this. And so, Jen led us with the idea of this is how it's done at scale. Okay, how do we modify? And bumpy, awkward, but food got in the hands of people who needed it, and that I think it was in most cases successful. So yeah. Okay, so Act 73, the redistricting task force met today, and they, as I think I mentioned to you, they were considering 3 concepts, one of which had made its way into the form of a map. And the short version is that they decided not to send any maps or proposals out of the redistricting task force that would have forced consolidation of districts, which was a statement that they made, and a deliberate honoring of the vast public comment they received through 4 public comment sessions and surveys and testimonies, some of which this board participated in, that really said no one is in favor of that there might be other things that we could be doing that would help to achieve the goals that Act 73 had put forward, but they just didn't hear any testimony, and in fact they heard very loud, boisterous, consistent testimony through all aspects of the state that forced mergers was not something that that anybody felt would be helpful to any of the achievement of any of the goals. The secretary spoke to the importance of larger districts, and I think the record will show that she gave the committee the impression that if they put forth a map that would show that here's a way to consolidate districts, that would be brought forward, and they felt very strongly that that was not consistent with either their findings of what was pragmatic or reasonable right now, or the tenor of all of the public comment that they've received. And so they've chosen to draft a proposal instead that relates to collaborative educational service agencies, which is a Vermont CISA, which is not a BOCE, but a CISA. And also the concept of moving toward a regional high school with capital construction model in the state, with capital construction dollars, which is largely a favorable option given some of the building challenges that exist around the state. So that is the most important news relative to Act 73 today. I would assume that there would be a number of articles that will be coming out tomorrow about that, so look for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we can talk about Ellen's.
I have the student report.
We're moving up.
Oh, all right.
Yes, potentially.
I just don't want you to forget.
I won't
that
forget
she
you.
Gave it to me. So.
Yes.
She wants it read.
Yes, I just wanted to finish the report of the superintendent, to get that closure done. So typically, you make agenda changes at the beginning of the meeting, but that doesn't mean there is provisions where you can suspend the rules like they do in legislature and that kind of thing, right? And decide as a board, which would require a motion and a vote, to move that agenda item up. So we'd have to do it procedurally if we wanted to go ahead and do that.
Can I make a motion that we add a public, not move it up so much as add a new public comment period to happen now, in addition to the last public comment period at the end of the meeting?
Okay.
I'll second.
I'm sorry?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
Can we give it a time limit, please, due to the lateness of the night, if we're keeping the second one and we still have another major
About 3
presentation
minutes
to go?
per person.
So are you going to amend the motion?
That's just a comment to the motion, is can we give it a time limit?
That would require an amendment.
It's your regular comment period.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You could probably go
Yeah.
with that.
So we can go with the regular, which is 3 minutes per person.
Okay.
Or you can make an amendment to, potentially change the motion to be a duration of time.
I don't think that would go over with the, so I'll just leave it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. All those in favor of inserting a new public comments period, and I'm assuming you would say now?
Yeah.
Yep, at this point in time, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so at this time, we have now introduced a new public comment period after report of the superintendent. And I'm going to read our guidelines again that I read in the beginning. Public comments are encouraged and welcome at each regular board meeting during the period designated for public comment, which this will be now. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Citizens will be called upon by the board chair. And again, it's not a dialogue back and forth, but rather an opportunity for board members to listen to constituents. And please don't bring up personnel, student, or legal matters in doing so, okay?
And it's 3 minutes.
And 3 minutes, yes.
And it's Jason's time.
And yes, Jason will be our timer. And so at this point, we have some public in the room and we also have public online. So what I'm gonna do is start online and then we'll go back and forth.
I wanna go home.
So, who's the first?
Molly Kerr.
Okay.
Go ahead, Molly.
Molly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Molly Kerr, Shoreham parent. I run the Shoreham Rec Department, and I was on the Summer Planning Committee as well. I am very happy to hear some board members were asking why there wasn't more support for the 2 schools, and I know many parents want to keep the current setup, as this is the first year they've been having the combined grades for all K through 5. And in speaking with the teachers, they didn't really get the support at all this summer to prep. We have some amazingly talented teachers. We just want to give them the chance, and they've been there at least for more than the 1 or 2 years, thankfully. So we know several people that are looking to move to Shoreham, but with this whole discussion about the school not being offered for K to 5, that does sway their decisions slightly. We also really haven't had much consistency. So there's so many transitions in the last 5 years, just lack of support. So we this year have the same principal, thankfully, and we have some amazing staff, like I said. We have that multi-grade setup, which we think has been successful so far. We know it's been successful in other towns, and we just need that same type of support and consistent staff, I feel. I know that Dr. Baker said over 9 months, the combined grade teachers, some type of discussion she was having, but they've only been really given this option for 2.5 months. So we want to give them the support that they need to continue this. And we also had a speech specialist in Shoreham who was absolutely amazing, kind of a rock for all the kids. And then that individual was moved to another school. So once again, that consistency changed for our kids. And then my only thing is for the combined grades this year, I've had some confusion where my kid is in a 4 or 5 class and a K1. And in the 4 or 5, those grades are split in half. So rather than my son who's in 4th grade having math for 4th grade, is doing math with 4th, 5th. And then the other half of the grade is another 4th, 5th working with the teacher. So I'm definitely happy to have the interventionist here for the math teaching, but I'm just concerned as to why the district would want to set it up that way. And that's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll come back into the room. And is there anyone in the room who would like to make a public comment? If so, raise your hand.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm Rebecca Kerr. That's my sister-in-law who just stole most of my pieces, which is great. We think much alike. I do run the after-school program that serves Bridport and Shoreham children right now, and so this obviously comes to me on multiple different layers, one for my own children, but then also one that's running a program that has been operating since 2018 in our school. And so, you know, that comes with change for these children, right? Like if we're uprooting them again and we're changing buildings and we're changing teachers and we're changing transportation and we're doing all those things, like all of that plays a factor. And most likely you see it in a social setting and in your academics. That's going to be the first places that it's going to hit. I have also been a part of the Shoreham Elementary School as a mom for 7 years. This is only my second year of a consistent principal. We have seen five principals in the last 7 years. As well as this is our first time having consistent teachers as well, because many of them retired, which I understand happens. So again, you have that change. I caution the board to make quick decisions when we don't give ample amount of time to see results happen. We've had years of lack of that consistency or those supports, mind you, and so if we keep adding more inconsistent measures, that just means a longer longevity of consistency down the road. I also come with a hat of a pre-K partnership within a school building. I operate an infant, toddler, and preschool program with the Rutland Northeast District, who runs a preschool program in the Whiting building. And so it can be done, but it takes a very timely, manageable partnership amongst both sides. And there is a huge need for infant toddlers. I'm going to tell you that my wait list is probably longer in infant and toddlers than it is in preschool. Preschool is not something that I'm hearing as much of a need because most districts and most private programs are able to meet those needs. So those are my pieces.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to our list online. We have a hand there.
Linda January.
Okay. Linda, you've been moved over.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. My name is Linda January. I am a parent in Bridport. I also wear many other hats, one of those being the executive director of Otter Creek Child Center. But I'm going to speak as a parent tonight. I too agree that when you look at the data, this is the critical thing to address is our students' success. And I believe that this plan does just that. I want to thank Dr. Baker and all of the administration who spent countless hours working on this over the last several months. And I was also part of that planning committee and all the other parents who did that. I think I appreciate everybody's work in coming forward to doing that. And I would encourage the board to really look at this situation in Bridport and Shoreham as the unique situation that it is and not compare what's happening in Bridport and Shoreham to other situations at other schools. I think this is a unique situation we have, like these two schools have found themselves in, that deserves thinking outside of the box and really kind of courageous solutions to really ensure children have academic success. And so I thank everybody, and I think that's all for now, and I'm sure I will be sending you more.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Okay, coming back to the room.
Abby Murphy. I have a
kindergartner this year and 2 incoming for next year. So
What town are you?
Shoreham.
Thank you.
As I went through Shoreham School and I've been a lifelong Shoreham resident, I have a lot of hesitation with the moving our kids to Bridport and only using 3 rooms, potentially 3 rooms in the Shoreham building. That seems like a waste of our tax dollars to me. And what else can we do with that building? And that's one question. 2, I think we haven't given this Act 73. We have no idea what they're going to do. And why make this decision? Because kids also thrive on consistency and stability. And with the combined classes we have this year, give it a little more time, see what we end up with in a year or 2, and also what is going to come down from the state. We don't know. So my feeling and understanding from who I've talked to in the community would rather, and what is it going to do to our tax dollars this year? But then when Act 73 comes down and makes another change, you never see taxes go down. You will always see them go up. So.
Thank you. Anyone online that would like to make a public comment, raise your hand.
Go ahead, Santana.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, thank you so much for all your thoughtful attention tonight. I know this was a long meeting and you still have more to go. I appreciate you allowing our voices to come earlier in the meeting. I am a Bridport parent of a kindergartner and a 3rd grader, and I've been on this working group throughout the summer. And I just want to make the public comment that I think that this plan has been so thoughtfully, humbly, and courageously crafted. It has been an example of what community leadership can look like. I've been so impressed with both principals and Dr. Baker and Emily, and they have so much work has been done before this has been brought before all of you to make sure that this was something that the community could get behind. I really empathize with Shoreham thinking about what this might mean for their community in the next steps. And I still believe that given this specific situation, that it's definitely the best choice. There has been so much thought that's been put into this from teachers and parents and leadership. And we have, yes, I would love to give it more time. And then also I know that this is such a pivotal moment in a student's development, and that there is only so much time for them to feel like they are successful learners and then prepare them for that middle school jump. And I think this plan can really set them up for success while still being reasonable in the budget that they're proposing. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the list online that would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands, one more time, and then if not, there will be another public comment at the end. Okay, so at this time, we'll close the public comment period and continue back to the agenda. And next is the report of the student rep, and Nava needed to leave, so are those questions? Jason?
Anonymous attendee left a comment in the Q&A. You want me to read that?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Public comment. It's important to consider the social emotional learning impact, access to resources with shared staff, and importance to care for students' basic needs when considering this big change for Shoreham and Bridport. A combined school could provide students the ability to have access to more full-time staff who are now shared staff, more exposure to new experiences and opportunities. School is much more than just classroom learning. Thank you for all your good work.
Is there any others?
That was it. There was some people asking to change the Zoom, stop screen sharing and stuff.
Okay.
Before we get too far, I just want to thank the building principals for their time and their attention. You know, Caitlin's in for the night. Sorry. But and Bruce as well, you know, if anyone else does, would like to wander on to sleep. Thanks for your presence.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for telling me
Yeah,
that.
well, you don't have to go down the legend.
I have my challenge. Next up is report of the student rep. Nava left, but she gave Suzanne her report.
Yeah, so Nava apologized, she had a ton of homework she said she had to get to, so she asked me to read the report. She said that she, along with Maya Breckenridge and Quinn Mackey, President and Vice President of the Student Council, along with administrators and teachers, attended the annual Rowland Conference. It sparked ideas to involve civic engagement in classes and find ways to build community and have effective communication in our schools. And then at MUHS, the Student Coalition on Human Rights is hosting a food drive along with Mums and Mary Hogan. It's a great way for us to focus on what the community can do in a time when families might be struggling. She says we are also having a Tigers Giving event through combining our mental health and student outreach clubs and hosting a clothing drive, in quotes, free fashion event, end quotes, with the environmental club and the already mentioned canned food drive. And the last thing, she really wanted to make sure that, I guess Tracy's already left, that Tracy heard was that Taryn and Nava will be visiting Salisbury with Tracy and students, and they are very much looking forward to it.
November 18th, I think.
She didn't put the date, she just said that it was coming up.
May or may not have been November 18th.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Can you repeat the name of the conference that they went to?
They went to the Rowland, ROWLAND.
Thank you.
Would you like me to forward this to you?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. Next up is report of the board chair. Number one, the DQS formative self-review. We already took care of that because I had the folks a copy of it and you filled it out. So now we have a pretty good representation. So we're done with that. I did want to mention that we are working on the superintendent formative review. Thank you for those that after the second request, did fill out the survey form. And so we will be meeting as an executive committee on Friday to review those results. And so in light of time, I'm going to then move it to board committee reports and updates and the facilities committee capital improvement planning. So I'm going to hand it off.
So Bruce, you and I, and maybe Caitlin, maybe we can convince Caitlin to do some of these slides. Huh?
What do you think, Kate?
Okay.
All right. So this is our review of the high school, similar to the previous.
Sorry, 1 second, not sharing.
Picture looked good.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
All right. So here is the high school as it exists today. And if you advance to the next slide. So we have done, this is the information we've derived here is from the previous assessments that we've done. So here we've got like a color-coded floor plan of years of construction. This floor plan does include the technical center, so you can see like the wings were labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J, and they correspond to like A, B, C, D, E, F, and G were all in the 1955 era, and then the other ones came after that. right, so the original part of the building was in 1955 with additions in 66, 91, 97. Current building's 144,000 square feet roughly. The current enrollment's around 530 students. The building capacity could be 747. I'm sure you would hear some pushback on that because you would be utilizing all classrooms, including the ones that are being taken for other purposes at the moment, and class sizes of 22 students per class. But we could put that many students in this building without adding square footage necessarily. Although, well, we'll keep going. Okay. So recent capital improvements, we've updated the kitchen and servery. We've done some bathrooms around the building. Roof repairs consist of, well, I guess in 2007, we re-roofed the H-wing. And then this summer, thanks to a nice July 10th storm, we put a 6,000 square foot patch on the gym roof. So with all the improvements we've done in the last few years, it improved our facilities condition index to fair from poor. Next slide. Okay, the overall process to date, we sent questionnaires to the school leadership, reviewed the responses, developed detailed lists of space needs based on the information, developed initial concept designed options for board consideration. So that I think one difference here between information you've gotten in the past and what we've done in this process is we've taken into consideration programming, which really wasn't addressed in past facilities condition index reports. So we have the list of the detailed process. So starting back in May, progressing through this summer up to October, we've gotten to a concept design presentation that was reviewed with the facilities committee on the 21st of October. The current state of the high school is, as we mentioned, is 530 students. Because of its central location, adjacent to the tech center, in the future, MUHS may become a regional comprehensive high school. It's all speculation based on rumors that we're hearing at the state. So no guarantee that that would happen. But currently the current state and is between 500 and 600 students. Alternate state for purposes of the plans we're going to show you. So alternate state 1 would be if we were to have a population of up to 750 students. And alternate state 2 would be if we became that kind of regional high school where we would have between 750 and 1,000 students. So current utilization rate 62.5%. To boost it up to a 75%, would require classroom sharing. It also required 22 students per classroom. So that's a maximum capacity of 747 students. All right. So the 3 facility issues that most commonly came up in our surveys and discussions about the building, need for security improvements at the front entry. We've looked at various designs over the past, memory serves me right, it's been a decade that we've been talking about different security designs for the front of the building. The auditorium and stage are insufficient for the school's class population. And currently now, if we hold anything in the auditorium, we split by grades. We can only get 2 grades in at a time. Often, like if you're planning on coming to the play this weekend, which I think you should, it's limited seating, we have a 390 seat capacity. So make sure you get your ticket online before you show up. The H-wing overheats in the shoulder seasons, making it uncomfortable. There's a couple of design elements that contribute to that, that are integrated right into the structure, so it's not an easy fix. But that is definitely one of the problems here at the high school. There are traffic and parking concerns, especially if we end up with more students here, so definitely baked into the planning would have to be some traffic surveys and suggestions on how to manage parking. Okay, concept summary. So, improvements for the current state, so the population we have now and the way we're doing things, would be a new secure entry addition and administration area, and that's reconfiguring the administration area as part of getting that secure entry in place. Dehumidification for FGHJ wings. So those are the administration area, cafeteria area, H-wing section over here, and J is the auditorium. And by dehumidification, it means that it would take the moisture out of the air. It's not the same as what they would call air conditioning, because once the humidification's gone out of the air, that's as much as you're gonna get out of it. You can't really make it much colder, but it would improve comfort. So the identified updates and repair projects that are part of the current state plan include replacing HVAC systems. The majority of the systems in this building are nearing 30 years old and definitely require a lot of maintenance to keep them going. They're also not as efficient as new systems. Most of the lighting in the building, we've updated a lot of it to LED, but it still doesn't meet current code. There's a fair amount of electrical work that needs to be done in the building. We have some old systems and multiple transformers that use up a lot of power that you don't necessarily need to. There are some structural issues that need to get addressed. Windows and doors are worn out. We have roofing. Maybe you can see a stained tile or two around. The insulation's pretty much non-existent in most of the building. If we're going to do lighting, ceilings need to be included. That just kind of goes hand in hand. Casework is pretty worn and needs addressing. Flooring in theater. So they're all very tangible, addressable things. All right. So, as we will repeat the enrollment, so once we get to above 600 students, the standard or the recommendation is that we would have a second gymnasium, and we would need to expand the auditorium to better serve the needs of our student population. At this enrollment size, current classroom capacity should be sufficient to stay within the comfortable space utilization rate. That still does mean the 22 students per classroom. And then we would have to identify and update repair projects as noted in the current state. So basically what that is saying is any place that we're going to do addition or add square footage where it marries into the existing building, the repairs that are in that area would kind of come off of the repair list, and they would be then counted as new construction. So just to kind of keep the balance sheet even. Alternate state 2, which would be kind of a more of a regional high school look. And here, we would anticipate somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 students. This would require a pretty substantial renovation at the high school with the addition of square footage. So we would be looking at a second gym still, a larger auditorium, additional classroom support and service spaces. And then parking definitely would have to be addressed. You know, in the back of our minds should be the realignment project of Charles Ave, so that if you're not aware of what that is, the town of Middlebury has worked with V-Trans to develop plans to have Charles Ave arc around and line up with Monroe, so it's a four-way stop out here instead of the double light system that we have now, which would help traffic a great deal. But that does affect our parking area and traffic flow through here. So here's a nice overhead view. The purple box that you can see on there may be hard to discern, it's kind of small, but that is dropped right in front of the existing front door, if you were to picture that. So that means we would take the grassy area that's out front in the bus circle, and right now it's kind of an oval shape. This would make it a true circle, shrink it down some, so we could still have buses come through that area, but then that would be a new entryway with the security measures built in, so people aren't walking directly into our student population as it's set up now. This one also depicts a new gymnasium on the north end of the building and an expansion to the auditorium. This would be the 1,000 student version. Again, addition of a gymnasium, the security update out front, but here it would be the demolition of the E wing and the D wing to construct a new larger auditorium, and then the section that you see kind of heads towards the river in the back would be a multi-story section of classrooms that then wraps around back into the H wing, and that helps to improve traffic flow and wayfinding. Here's a floor plan version instead of the aerial view. Here we're looking at just the security improvements in the front of the building. That's the hatched area that you can see. So if we go to alternate state 1, which would be to slightly, to increase above 600 students. Here you're looking at the hatched areas are an addition onto the existing auditorium, a new gymnasium, and the redesigned front entry. And then alternate state 3, we take over the auditorium space, becomes more of a music and arts combined area, because we will construct a new auditorium to the south. And then you can see the classrooms kind of lined up, headed back towards the H wing. And then you may be able to see the faint outline of the existing floor plan underneath, where the E, C, and D wing kind of make that U around. And so those would be demolished in order to construct this new area. We did go through several iterations, so you can see, it might be easier to see these. So you can see some where we actually, imagined that this becomes the entry to the building rather than this in the center. We talked about doing this differently, so there's 2 rows of classrooms here instead of the last design you saw for the new auditorium, which is, I think, the last one over there. Yeah, that one. I think, and this is all, very high altitude stuff. Nothing's set in stone. These are ideas for us to review, something to kind of get your mind wrapped around what changes could look like.
Ultimately, this design was sort of selected-ish because it is a very efficient footprint that gives us the class space needed for 1,000 students with the smallest amount of additional new square footage.
Right. All right. So I like this probable cost opinion. We're not taking any ownership of this. We have consulted with, industry, what do I want to say, cost estimators in order to get this cost opinion. So we're looking at, and this is for the current state, which would be, the front entry, which is roughly 6,800 square feet, looks like $6.5 million. Renovations to update lighting and, let's see, what other renovations? No, actually the updates and repairs would be the lighting, the windows, the doors, that kind of stuff. So basically, if you add up all the things that were in current state, you'd be at roughly $46.5 million of cost to do that. So, and then if we go to alternate state 1, which was the addition of another gymnasium, or of a second gymnasium, and to give the auditorium some more capacity, you take that $46.5 million, tack on another, just under 17 million, you're at 63,400,000. And if you were to go for the full-blown 1,000-student school, you're looking at roughly $111 million. Again, very broad strokes, high altitude. Don't use these numbers to set a budget.
It is helpful, however, given that the regional comprehensive high schools are part of the proposal that's moving forward. So it's just helpful even to have a sketch and information for them, because obviously the capital construction load that is going to come across the state, right, it kind of gives you a sense of how substantial that might be.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, and Bruce, I'm not sure which of these would go to you, but one is on that point, Wendy, about the regional comprehensive high schools. Can you explain what that is, especially if, I know you literally cannot bet on anything that's happening right now at the state level, but if they're not advancing if the task force is not currently advancing plans to force consolidation, then under what scenario would there be a regional high school? And then I'll just throw it out there so I don't have to speak again. My second question, I think, is more for you, Caitlin, which is under alternate state 2, we have 120 to 230 additional students with no additional classrooms, if I'm hearing this right?
Alternate 1, I think, right?
Alternate 1, yeah.
Yeah, alternate 1.
Isn't it state 2 is just adding an auditorium and a gym?
No, that's state 1.
Current state is 1, alternate state 1 is 2, and alternate state 2 is 3.
But yes, it's the middle one.
Yeah, you got
The
it.
middle
You're right.
one, but does the middle one add classrooms?
No.
Right.
That's
So
classroom
that's what I'm
sharing.
saying. But it's still 600 to 750 students when we're currently at 530. So it's a lot more students in the building and in classrooms with no additional classrooms. So I'm curious.
I can speak to that.
Oh, hey Matt. Go for it, Matt.
Hi, sorry, I had to scoot out to deal with the skunk thing. The alternate state 1 doesn't add classrooms because the classrooms have the capacity to come up to a space utilization rate of 75 to 85%, so they're not there now. After 85%, scheduling becomes hard, and you kind of lose the ability to move people around and have enough swing space. So they recommend not going all the way to 100, but space utilization, which leads to sharing classrooms in some instances. can absorb that much new enrollment without needing to add classrooms.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I mean, I'm just curious what that would mean from, I get that we can do it, but just from the way that the building has functioned for a long time, not being at that capacity, I'm thinking about that too. So the first question is about what a regional comprehensive high school would look like under an unconsolidated district model.
Is there anything else, Caitlin, you want to add to the point about how that utilization rate would shift things?
It would shift things, and also, if you walk through this building during the school day, you can feel pretty clearly that it's underpopulated. It's a lot of extra elbow room. Our classrooms most of them are fairly big, and our class size is fairly small. So I think to some extent we would increase class size. To some extent, I think that alternate state one asks us to reclaim some of the spaces that have been otherwise purposed, right? So we've got a lot of district personnel occupying various classroom spaces in this building. I think that some of that would need to be reorganized. There's some big classroom spaces we would reclaim just by changing the way that they're used. Many of our classrooms were clearly designed for classroom sharing, for teachers sharing classrooms, and none of our teachers share classrooms right now. So I don't want to understate that it would be tricky for us to learn how to live in that, but there's space.
Okay, thanks, that's super helpful.
I have a really quick added question to that. It said 22 students per classroom in that. What would you say our average is right now?
Between 15 and 18, depending on the department, would be the average.
Just curious.
And you can see that in last week's spotlight, Jess.
Oh,
There's for both the middle and the high, that's there, mostly for reference so that we can go back and go, right, what was that? So today, the task force has said that they like the idea of a regional comprehensive high school, which if they're using the legal term of that means it is a high school that has a technical center connected. So for us, it would mean that the technical center would no longer be on its own. It would be under one administration. The administration would grow by one who would be primarily overseeing technical programming. The reason for that, there are comprehensive high schools across the state in some places. The reason that is favorable is that you've got all the scheduling considerations worked out with one administrative team. You have presumably better access. It's easier for a DP student to be able to pop over to do something in the technical center if all of that is in one place. And so it's thought of as a preferred access model. So in order to increase access to CTE, one thought is that we would be increasing the regional comprehensive high schools, building onto wherever the technical center is in a manner that would increase high school capacity so that, folks from Otter Valley, presumably, Virgins, Mount Abe could be coming into this high school to be able to promote access to CTE and also so that the programming, which, we're a mid-size high school really right now, on the small side of mid-size, right? So, it gets tricky for Caitlin and her team to figure out how many sections of something that they can offer sometimes. If we were to be able to add more students, that gets less tricky probably, and that's helpful. So to stabilize that. The discussion that was in the original proposal was that construction funds would also require a commitment to ensure that districts are somehow either merged or working together in some similar manner, so that you kind of had a guaranteed catchment area of high school students that would be attending that school in return for the extra many millions of dollars that would be put in to ensure that everything was up to snuff. And that will be part of what is going forward as a proposal from the task force, that there are BOSI units and that we are moving toward a regional high school, regional comprehensive high school thinking. I think because there's widespread agreement in the state that, high school kids probably should have a wide breadth of opportunity and clear access to CTE centers, which is not true across all parts of the state.
Thank you, Wendy. Any other questions?
I know it's a bit early in the process, maybe for this kind of strategic and kind of meta thinking, but I'm trying to get an idea for the range of what in the past kind of what's the price range that the school boards have kind of put forward as a bond measure to, or however we're planning to fund this, because it's just the numbers are large.
Well, yes, they are. The career center that was just proposed in Central Vermont was what, 149 million. You know,
Burlington High School is 200.
I was just gonna say that one, right? So I mean, I think, you know, these large high schools, I mean, and, you know, these comprehensive areas, I mean, they are pretty pricey. I mean, it really, bonds run the gamut, you know, from a collection of here's a $3 million project, and here's one, 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 and we want to put those in a bond to, you know, to leverage the debt. To we have substantial work to do and pull that together. I think one of the things that once we get to the prioritization phase of this work that we'll be thinking about is, you know, we'll be watching throughout the legislature where the discussion goes relative to the role of capital spending within the spending threshold. You might remember that there are a number of districts that are advancing. I'm sure there will be multiple bills presented that remove capital debt from the excess spending threshold, directly related to the fact that the state has not provided construction aid since 2007. So it sort of feels like that's not a reasonable expectation that at this point it goes inside an operational budget in order to be able to accommodate. Steve.
Being on the facilities committee, I will say, in spite of the large numbers, don't lose sight of the fact that some of the smaller things are very real needs in the shorter term. Like, we've talked quite a bit about the front entryway and both kind of the security there. I can't remember if Caitlin mentioned it, or we may have heard it from a student, but what it's like to enter the front hallway and then to kind of encounter that cross-flowing traffic, and just what that is like for students that are coming into the building, how that feels. And then also the heat in the H-wing, I believe you said it was like 90 degrees there. And so just keep those in mind, that some of the smaller things are very real shorter term needs. We decided to bring everything to this just because the committee hasn't wanted to kind of filter anything. But yeah, there certainly is shorter term needs.
Mary Heather. Yeah, just to follow up on what Steve was saying, you know, we wanted to try to make sure that we're bringing it all to the full board so that we're not sort of pre-filtering, with the exception of the sort of the alternate 2 option that would be the conceptual regional high school. You know, we looked at a bunch of different proposed footprints for additional classrooms, all of which would have required a lot more, like Jason said, a new square footage, which of course is more costly. And so the one that we decided to blow up is kind of the easiest, most efficient potential drawing for a regional high school option. And the other thing that we liked about this is that the additions could be conceptually added in stages, right? So, you know, this still has the same, front entrance addition, new gym addition. So, you know, you could conceptually imagine that, you know, you proceed with the immediate needs, the front entrance, and then you're not going to knock that down later on to do the more comprehensive, if that's in fact what the district ends up needing. So it seemed more like a stepped approach, which made the most logical sense to present.
The other thing we didn't call it on the slide too is this shows the reconfigured Charles Ave that lines up in Monroe with But that wouldn't happen for at least 5 years earlier, so, but there's additional parking in this and reconfigured parking.
Others? Well, thank you.
I don't, Caitlin, did you want to say
I
something?
have a reservation about this. I don't know if I'm supposed to say it out loud right
Please do.
This plan increases our student population up to maybe as many as 1,000 students, but it eliminates the commons, which is our secondary eating space. And so we eat in the cafeteria, the commons, and the courtyard when the weather is nice. And this, you get to the courtyard through the commons and you've just eliminated 2 of our 3 eating spaces and almost doubled our population maybe. So that is a design characteristic that might need some attention.
Yes.
Great. I also suggested to the architect that maybe we locate the new gym on the west side of the H-wing because that would solve some mechanical issues and also keep access around the building without having to pave the end of the football field.
Okay, thank you, good work.
Thank you.
Next up is our second public comment period. Third, I'm sorry, I'm reading the agenda and it says second. The third, is there anyone online?
Attendance has dwindled.
No one's in the room. So I'm gonna move forward. Next up is board reflections. Any reflections from the board this evening? Yes.
Just one, which is I wonder if the agenda could be redesigned so that the student updates come before, maybe not every superintendent's report, but the ones that we would anticipate being longer. Because I've noticed with some consistency that the students have to go home to do homework, which they should. But maybe we could hear from them earlier.
Yeah, sure.
I also had a comment. I know that the schedule is very, very tight these next couple months, but I personally would feel more comfortable making a decision regarding Bridport and Shoreham if we were able to have some kind of a meeting with, and I don't want to discount all the work that's gone in by so much staff to do that outreach and communicate with people in Shoreham and Bridport. But I think, and I respect the idea that we need to make this decision quickly and not dilly-dally, not kind of push it down the road. And so I would feel much more comfortable making that kind of decision, having face-to-face conversations with people in those 2 communities. Our next board town, school board town hall is actually happening in Middlebury. And all of a sudden I'm wondering if at a last moment measure it might be wise to shift that, but just something that I'm thinking about, and maybe as a community and engagement committee we can think about some kind of solution for that.
Well, and at this point, we wouldn't be shifting our Middlebury town hall. If that was a route that we were traveling, then it would mean adding in another one. However, we've already held one in Bridport.
As well as Shoreham. Or I mean, not yours, but there's been 2 community meetings that board members could have come to. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying there was the opportunity that we did have in both Bridport and Shoreham. And board members were invited to come to that.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah. And yeah, so there's a tax on the community as well, to come out again. But we can take it under advisement.
I think, we're just butting up against our ongoing struggle of having open communication with our constituents, with our people. Our first town hall was held in Bridport and had low attendance, most likely because of meeting saturation, right?
I mean, I wonder if a passive way of doing it would be to invite or request if the board could add something to the Shoreham and Bridport newsletters that go out. inviting emails and inviting feedback to the board on this issue. It's not another meeting. It is another email, but that does go to parents and families. And it might just, and if it comes from us as the board saying, we would like to hear from you about this. Some we already have heard from some people, but I think that we could invite more of that.
And we have our general board email.
Yep. Steve?
I think Ellie.
Oh, Ellie, hi, sorry.
Hi, I raised my hand to make a comment, but it wasn't on this right here. I just wanted to let you guys all know that we got a significant amount of snow during the course of this meeting. I hope you all get home really safe tonight because it's slippery out here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh dear.
Thanks,
Ellie. Is there any leftover pizza?
I was looking out the window and I was like, oh my goodness, like it was not, there wasn't a bit of snow when this meeting started. And I think we had like 3 inches of snow here. I'm in Middlebury right now.
3 days.
The one that started 5 hours ago.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. Anything else? If not, a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
Okay, at 9